Getting in the truck, starting the engine, and driving out of the house was easier than I thought. I was leaving the house I had called home for the past 9 years with Connie. We had bought it before we were married and moved in after our honeymoon. Somehow I felt like it was going to be harder to move on, as they say. 10 minutes later, I pulled onto the freeway heading north. I was on the I-45 freeway, heading toward Dallas. There I was to turn onto I-35 toward OKC, then onto Kansas City, before turning north again. My destination was Minneapolis. I arranged for a transfer, much to the dismay of my supervisor. He warned me that it was cold there in the winter and I would have to shovel snow. I laughed and said I was used to the cold. He looked at me and shrugged. I was clearing the town when I started thinking about what led up to this. It all started a little over a year ago. A close friend of Connie's came into my office during a layoff. She said her car was in the shop and she needed a ride home. Truth be told, I never really felt much need for this woman. I thought she was too demanding of herself. In other words, she was a total bitch. But I tolerated her because she had been my wife's best friend since elementary school. When we went to her house, she invited me to come upstairs. I said no thanks. I had to get home. She said she knew Connie was out of town, so I didn't need to hurry. She offered to cook. I knew something was wrong here because she hates to cook. Soon she showed me more than I needed to see. I told her it was time for her to go out. She pouted and said I didn't know what I was missing. I just looked at her. Then she asked, "Who would know?" I replied, "I would know." At this, she gave up and smiled. Can't blame a girl for trying. She got out of the car and I drove away without looking back. I probably should have realized by now that it wasn't over, but silly old me didn't think about it. That's where my journey began. I summed it up. I had just turned 34 years old. My height was 6 feet. Actually, I was a little shorter still, but I still said 6 feet. My weight was approaching 200 pounds, and I could lose about 10 or so. My hair is short but brown, as are my eyes. I guess I don't look too bad, and I always thought I was lucky to have Connie. She was a real knockout. She was just a beauty. She was still beautiful, but I felt so detached. She was more like a stranger or a TV character that I had gotten to know so well over the years. So I left her behind. Only physically, because I wasn't done mourning my lost love. I always thought we would grow old together and die in each other's arms. But that wasn't meant to happen. But since a big part of me had died, it didn't seem as much of a loss as it could have been. There was nothing left to do but drive, and I let my mind reconstruct the events, thinking that maybe I could have done things differently. It had been 6 months since that April day when I had given Anne a ride home. Connie came home as angry as I had ever seen her. I asked her what the problem was, but she only threw me a glance. Without saying a word, she walked to the bedroom and slammed the door shut. It was a little unusual, but not out of the norm. Connie did have a temper, but on all other occasions, she unleashed her anger on me without hesitation. She didn't leave the bedroom for over an hour. When I went in to check on her, she was sitting at the dressing table in her nightgown, brushing her hair. When she saw me in her reflection, she demanded that I leave. Not wanting to stay where I wasn't expected, I took the next day's clothes and left. I slept in the spare bedroom, half expecting Connie to come after me. That would be an ambiguous blessing. If she came, it would only be to express her displeasure. I went to work without getting a word from her. I called her twice, but she didn't answer. I knew she had caller ID and felt that when she saw my number, she sent it to voicemail. That was fine, but she had to know I was calling. I caught her at home that evening, but I wasn't shocked. When she wasn't home by 9 o'clock, I called her cell phone. I left a message and began to get a little angry myself. At 11 o'clock, I was trying to get to sleep when the phone rang. It was Connie. She was drunk. I could tell by the way she spoke. In a few short sentences, she informed me that she wasn't coming in that evening. She'd had a little too much to drink and was at a friend's house. This alarmed me, but she hung up before I could say anything. I got up and waited for a while, wondering what to do. At midnight, I called her on the phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I wasn't just angry, I was frustrated, but there was nothing I could do about it. The next day at the office, I'm sure everyone knew my mood. That night, I went in for a drink. I was going to be late too. I did, and I didn't get to bed until after midnight. I found Connie's car in the garage. The engine was cold. I realized she was at least an hour ahead of me. I went in, expecting a scene, but there wasn't. The house was dark. I groped my way to the bedroom. The door was locked. Feeling alcoholic and tired, I lay down on the vacant bed and collapsed on it. The next morning, I woke up a little late and found I was alone. Connie had already left. Fortunately for me, it was Friday morning. I went to work a little late and tried to make the most of the day. I didn't call Connie, but I did call a male friend who worked with her to make sure Connie made it. All he could confirm was that her car was in the parking lot. And that Friday night, I walked into the house and saw her waiting for me. She had a glass of wine and a sober expression on her face. I was greeted with the words, "We need to talk." As most married men will attest, this means she is going to talk, and you should listen intently. She began, "Is there something you want to tell me?" "Yes, there is, but I didn't think this was a good time to tell her she was being a bitch." I also remembered the old saying, "I'll wait for her to tell me what I did wrong. I'm not going to admit to something she doesn't know about yet." When I stopped talking, she opened up. "I didn't think you'd confess on your own. But I know everything. You can't hide it anymore. I never thought you would betray me like this." Now I was at a loss. What the hell had I done? I tried desperately to figure it out. I hadn't bought anything expensive. I hadn't planned a fishing trip in the bay. I remembered the date. It wasn't her birthday or our anniversary. And what did she mean by betray her? Thinking about how to lie your way out of this? I looked at my wife of 8 years and shrugged. I'd figure it out if I knew what I needed it for. "Come on, Martin. Remember, you thought you could get away with it, didn't you?" "Got away with what?" "Cut the bull. You know what I'm talking about." "I have no idea. And if you want to keep talking in circles, I think I'll go get drunk." "Hell no. You're staying here until you come clean and tell me why." "Why what?" "Why did you do it, asshole? What do you say?" The asshole let me know she was very serious. But what was I supposed to admit to? What had I done? I know I can be an insensitive asshole, but all men can be like that. What was I missing? I tried to remain calm. "Done what? I can't apologize until I know what I did." "Oh, mister, apologizing won't fix it." "Damn, this is going to cost me," I thought. "What will it take then?" I asked. "I don't know yet, but it will cost you a lot. It might even cost you our marriage." That got my attention. This was serious. I started thinking. What the hell had I done? Whatever it was, this was definitely how I wanted it to go down. She saw my hesitation and furrowed her brow. Her anger was flaring with renewed vigor. Before I could speak, she laid it all out for me. "You thought you could entertain my best friend and get away with it. Anne is too close a friend to allow yourself to do that. She told me everything. I know what you've been doing, and I wonder how many others there are out there that I don't know about." I just stared across the table at her like she was crazy. That only enraged her even more. "You asshole. You gave Anne a ride home and wanted to, as you put it, pay. You followed her to the door and stormed out after her. She didn't really want it, but she thought it was better than ruining me." I was at a loss for words. I remembered giving Anne a ride home, but even after her suggestion, I let it pass. Heck, I'd forgotten all about the tramp. As you can guess, the rest of the weekend went to pieces. There was yelling, threats, tears, and name-calling. I was guilty of only some of the name-calling, but still continued my part of the battle. For 3 months, we slept in separate beds. I was at my wit's end and was looking for a divorce lawyer. A buddy had used his services in his divorce. The lawyer's name was Jerry Lewis, but believe me, He was no comedian. His wife ripped him off in the divorce, and he used every opportunity to get back at the female gender. I was about to suggest it when Connie came to me one night and told me it was time to make things right. Our marriage was too important to the two of us to continue living the way we were living. She called a truce and suggested we split the master again. I felt a little better, but the damage had already been done. After that, nothing was ever the same again. It wasn't peace, but rather a truce. We both felt it. And then one night, it happened. It was Friday night, and Connie hadn't come home. I got a call at midnight saying she was spending the night out of the house. I didn't argue and accepted it. That was the second blow. Connie didn't get home until noon. She was wearing shorts, a blouse, and sandals. She had a gym bag in her hand. She looked happy, as if nothing had happened and everything was normal. She went to the bathroom and took a shower. Closing the door, I checked the bag. Inside was an evening gown, heeled shoes, makeup, and underwear were in the plastic bag that held her work clothes from Friday. I wondered what that meant. I started imagining all sorts of things. And I do mean all sorts of things. Not just bad things, but that maybe there was a company party and she went to it. She didn't just invite me. She had her hang-ups, but I still loved her in spite of it all. When she walked into the kitchen, she smiled. "Thanks for helping me unpack." I took that as a sign that she wanted to tell me what happened. So I asked. Connie blushed and tried to look humble. "Well, to be completely honest, I had a date." "A date," shouted I. "Yes, a date, and I'm not going to lie about it like you did." "What the hell are you talking about?" "It's honest," she replied. "Fair?" "Yeah, you entertained Anne, so I got my turn." "Woman, let me tell you that Connie never liked being called that." "I told you there was nothing going on with Anne. I don't know why you don't believe me." "Keep lying, but I won't believe you. I had a great date. Dinner, dancing. You know you haven't taken me to a dance in a while, but where was I?" "Yeah, after the dance, we went back to his place. He was a real gentleman." "A gentleman?" "Yes. He was gentle and took his time." "I don't want to hear it." I said it, still sitting at the table. I just wanted her to be quiet. Connie knew she had found my button. "Yes, he was a wonderful lover. He took care of me in every way. He could have given you some advice." "I don't want to hear it," I exclaimed. "Why not? You don't want to know that another man can give me pleasure better than you?" "I just don't want to." I covered my face with my hands and said, "I think I'm going to be sick." And I felt sick. I had to go to the bathroom because I felt like I was going to throw up. But I didn't, and after an hour the urges went away. I washed my face, got out of the bathroom, grabbed a beer, and went to the back porch. I was sitting there watching the sun go down when Connie showed up. I didn't pay any attention to her at first. Finally, I noticed her sitting next to me when she spoke. "Isn't the sunset beautiful? It marks the end of the day and the promise of a new tomorrow." I jumped up when she spoke because I was a little scared. I just looked at her, and then looked at the last rays of the sun again. "Yes, let's make our problems end. We can put them behind us, and tomorrow we can start a new life." I looked at the woman again. She appeared before me in a different light. How could she be so careless about what she'd done? Connie sipped her wine. "I think we should make new vows to each other and then go to bed and seal them." That struck me as funny, and I laughed for the first time in hours. "What's so funny?" she asked in a harsh tone. "Well, I don't know. Let's see. A new vow. Why? You didn't fulfill the previous one." "Well, asshole, you didn't fulfill it either." I just looked at her with as much hatred as I could remember. "Don't look at me like that." Then her voice softened. "I still love you, and I want this all behind us. Let's go to bed. I need you, and I want you." Damn, you're crazy woman. Woman again. "What does that mean, Martin Raymond Jameson?" Connie went into mother mode, using all three of my names. She knew it pissed me off. "I mean, I'm not going to go to bed with you. Go back to your buddy. I think the word is slut. With those words, I stood up and headed for my master. She followed me. I guess she thought we were going to hit the sack, but that didn't happen. I gathered up almost all of my clothes and carried them to the spare room. She followed me with a whoop or an explanation, which I ignored. The next trip was to get my stuff from the bathroom. Needless to say, Saturday night in Houston was cold and Sunday was even colder. I accepted the facts and headed to work. It was time to do something. I worked on the translation and gave Jerry Lewis everything I had. I think he was absolutely thrilled with the case. That was a little over 2 weeks ago, and now I'm alone on the road to Minneapolis. The ride was very lonely, and I felt the loss more than I could have imagined. I had intended to stop in Kansas before stopping, but instead I drove straight through. Not that I wanted to, I was just afraid that if I stopped, I would sleep through my decision and turn back in the morning. Sleepless nights can be such an ordeal for a person. Arriving in town about 20 hours later, I was ready to sleep. I found a hotel and checked in. It was Saturday, so I paid for 2 days. I didn't have to come into the office during the week, but I didn't want to sit in the hotel. It was a surprise to everyone in the office when they found out I was traveling alone. They wanted to have a farewell dinner for us, me and Connie, but understood when I explained. I was a little surprised that the news hadn't gotten to Connie, but she was truly surprised when I left. I had planned to leave before she got home, but because of the last-minute sale and the fact that she came a little early, I had to meet her. I checked my phone but knew there would be no call. I bought a cheap cell phone and transferred my number to it. I then got a new iPhone number that I carried with me. I hid the old phone in a den under the couch. If Connie tried to call, she would find it. I smiled, but it was a sad smile as I wondered if she had tried to call. Maybe she was in her buddy's bed, and I was sitting in a hotel room on the edge of the country. I had to put the thought out of my mind. There was nothing left to do but go in search of my new office. Finding it was much easier than I thought it would be. I thought all cities were like Houston, but it turned out that wasn't the case. Over dinner, sitting alone, I realized that I needed a place to stay. An apartment would do just fine, hopefully at least partially furnished. Monday came, and I turned pale. I thought that being away from Connie would make me feel better, but it didn't. It's hard to explain, but even though I was angry with her, I was comforted to some extent knowing she was in the house. I had to come to terms with that. So I did what I could and went to the report. I was expected, but not that morning. I met my boss Bill and his secretary Jackie. Jackie was an attractive woman in her early 50s. She dressed well and was very professional. What caught my attention was not only her smile, but also the stone on her wedding finger. I paid attention to it not because I liked her, but rather because of its size. If it was real, a man who could afford it wouldn't need her paycheck. As it turned out, she was married to a very wealthy man, which allowed her to keep her job. She had been with the company for over 15 years. She took the position when her children were in middle school. Bill asked if I still had a position. I replied that I didn't. He asked if I would like Jackie to pick up a few spots for me. I was surprised at what she had in store for me by 1 p.m. As I was picking up the brochures, she mentioned that she had a daughter about my age who would like to show me around. I thanked her but told her I was married. Jackie threw me a strange look and then smiled. I thought she was offended, but it turned out she knew about my impending divorce and realized it was a topic I didn't want to discuss. If anyone needs to confirm your occupancy, here's my direct line card. Most of the complexes are new and need tenants, but they may still need verification. At my second stop, I rented a one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor. It was unfurnished, but they had a company that furnished it and rented it out or sold anything or everything they delivered. I had money for per diem and paid for the apartment. By Wednesday, I was settled in and ready to go. Connie didn't track me down until the following Thursday. By then, she was no longer a happy woman. She had received papers about our impending divorce. I took some verbal abuse and tried not to respond to it. I was at my desk in my new office and didn't want to wipe my dirty laundry in front of my new coworkers. One more thing. It took me about 40 calls before I found the damn phone under the couch. You sure can be nice sometimes. And last Tuesday at the office, I was handed the paperwork. I only found you when my lawyer demanded to know your address to serve you papers. I'm suing you. You, you twisted asshole. That wasn't the hard part for me. What got to me was when she broke down and cried. I knew I still loved her, but not like I used to. It still hurt me to see her pain. Thankfully, my attorney held up the paperwork. He required legal representation for me in Texas. And since I was out of state, they had to work through him. He kept in touch, and I could hear the pleasure he took in pissing off Connie. People were different in Minnesota. Not bad, just different. In the far north, people enjoy the warm months as much as they can. The only exception was that all the swimming pools were closed. But otherwise, people used the parks and fields to play ball until the wee hours of the morning, especially in the summer when the kids were out of school. I started walking to work. It was a little over a mile. The first day I regretted my decision, not even halfway there. When they found out I was walking, I expected to be scolded for not having enough money for gas, but that didn't happen. By the second week, I was already enjoying the walk. I was watching spring pass and summer go away. It was already getting chilly, and it was only the end of September. I took my last walk, not thrilled with the cold 20 miles per hour wind. I thought I understood why we had underground parking garages, but not completely yet. I was walking down the hallway to my door when a woman came out of it, nearly running into me. All I remember is that she was wearing a small swimsuit. It barely covered her, but I didn't complain. "Oh, sorry, I was going for a swim. I probably should have put my wrap on first." She smiled, and it lit up the hall. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at her like I'd never seen a woman before. "Will I see you there?" she asked. I wasn't planning on it. I tried to smile. "Maybe next time." Then she walked away. I must have looked like a fool. I just stood there and watched. She never put her handkerchief on, just slung it over her shoulder. When she turned the corner, I headed for my door. And then I felt stupid. I thought of her as I unlocked the door. I had just gotten inside when the phone rang. I was on a call, so I grabbed the receiver. "I bet it's a surprise," came Connie's voice. "Yeah, I guess it is." "How's it going?" I asked, unable to think of anything better to say. "Do you really care?" The question sounded without sarcasm, and it hit a nerve. "Yeah, in a way." "I'm not doing well. I miss you and I want you back. I just got your number. It took me so long to track you down. I love Martin and I'm sorry, but can't we work things out? I'll make it right. I promise." I could hear her crying softly. "Let me think about it. I just don't know. A lot of water has gone under the bridge." "Not as much water as our marriage." I was caught. All I could do was promise to think about it and call her back. She still had our old number and cell phone, so I knew them by heart. We talked and laughed some more. It was nice in a way, but it was also painful at the same time. It reminded me of what I had lost. I hung up, promising to call her within a week. For the next few days, I agonized, and most in the office noticed it. Finally, on the 6th day, I called. It was hard, but I told Connie that we'd better get a divorce. She took it better than I thought she would. That Wednesday, I was relieved when I hung up the phone. It was over. On Friday, I drove home. As I stepped out of the elevator from around the corner and headed for my door, I saw Connie sitting on her suitcase near my door. She didn't look happy. I walked over to her. It was over 100 feet, but I wished it was a mile. When she saw me, her face lit up. "What are you doing here?" I asked, but not with anger. "I just had to come. I still love you and I think you still love me. I just couldn't let it go without one last try." I looked around. "Let's go inside." "I don't mind. I think we need some privacy." Saying that, she looked down the hallway. I followed her gaze but saw nothing. Inside, she tried to kiss me, but it didn't feel right. She was a little offended. What's the matter? Do I have bad breath? No, it's kind of wrong. Does it feel okay with that redheaded bitch? I just stared at her. I was stunned because I had no idea what she was talking about. With who? Oh, Hall's monitor. I wrinkled my face. Hall monitor? Don't play dumb with me. That long-legged troll who came to ask why I'm sitting in front of your door. No, she said. Why you're sitting at Martin's door? If you don't know her, how did she know your name? I still didn't understand who she was talking about, but I went to the door. I opened it and called out to her. See? My name is right here on the door. Well, she knew you anyway. And when I told her I was your wife, well, you could see it in her face. You won't get that again. I was in no way, I said, raising my voice. If you don't know who she is, how do you know you weren't sleeping with her, Mr. Jameson? I didn't answer. The night did not go well. She slept in my bed, I slept on the couch. We talked and argued and fought all the next morning. I'm sure everyone in the hall or in the apartment to my left knew about the fight, but probably not all the words. Finally, on Saturday afternoon, I sat Connie down at the table. We both calmed down a bit. She apologized to me, and I had to explain. Connie, I have forgiven you. I did a while ago. If you forgave me, why didn't you come home? That's right, I can forgive, but the damage is done. Let me explain. You took my most cherished possession and broke it. Whether in anger or accidentally, it doesn't matter, but the treasure is broken. I can forgive you even for a willful act, because I know it was anger, not revenge. She smiled and fell silent. I raised my hand and continued. As I said, my treasure was broken, better said, shattered. Then you tired to glue it back together. It was possible and it could fulfill its purpose, but every time I saw it, I was reminded that it was broken and would never be the same. So you haven't forgiven. Connie began to cry. It was painful. I hugged her and told her that yes, I had forgiven, but the damage had been done and it could never be undone. What we had was special, but when this came between us, that feeling was gone. I care about you a lot, but it's better for us to part ways. I don't want to relive this grief every day. Connie fought back tears. I understand. His touch and everything else just wasn't like you, Martin. And when I was with him, it wasn't the same. Now it wasn't about what she said, but how. I knew she had done more than just hold old Roger's hand. It hurt, and I wished I'd never heard the name. Martin, I went outside with every intention, but I couldn't. I thought of you, and it wasn't that. Then you know what I mean? I asked, not wanting to go any further on the subject. Yes, but believe me, I'm telling you the truth. Nothing happened. Connie burst out before she started crying again. I hugged her with a broken heart. I felt all the pain again. At that moment, the truth didn't matter. It was over and done. The damage had been done. Deep down, I knew she had slept with Roger. But I wasn't angry, I was hurt. Saturday night, I took Connie to the airport and walked her through security. Then I headed home. I felt tired, drained, and empty. I walked down the hallway to my door. It seemed to be the same 100 miles I had wished for on Friday afternoon. I was only 3 steps from the door when she walked out. It startled me. I stopped in place and looked at her. It was the same woman I had seen in the bathing suit. I looked her over from head to toe. For the first time, I noticed she had a head of red hair. Do I really look that bad? She smiled. I'm sorry. I just got lost in my thoughts. You startled me, and I had to remember where I was. You look like you need a friend. Come in and sit down for a minute. I don't think you need to be alone. I looked at her, then at the door. I saw her name, Katie Taylor. How many times had I walked past her door but never read it? not even after seeing her in her swimsuit. I followed her into her apartment, mostly because I didn't want Connie's ghost haunting mine. Katie's apartment was warm, not just from the temperature, but from the mood I could feel. Within minutes, we were already sipping wine. I looked into the beautiful green eyes and asked, "Are you the hall monitor?" She smiled and replied, "Guilty." The wine had an effect on me. "You may not know this, but Connie called you a bitch." I don't know why I said it, but I did. "My bad again," she smiled over her glass. "I hope it doesn't make you think any worse of me." "No, not at all, but I can't say the same about my soon-to-be ex-wife." "It doesn't matter," she smiled again. I just looked at her smile and felt warmth throughout my body. Thinking at that moment that it was the wine, I just accepted it. The next thing I remember is that I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. I was hungry because I hadn't eaten all Saturday. I looked around. I wasn't lying in my bed. I was only wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I looked at the other side of the bed. It was untouched. My pants and t-shirt were lying at the foot of the bed. It took a moment to guess where it was. It was Katie's bedroom. At that moment, she entered the room. She looked bleary-eyed, bushy-tailed, and still had the same gorgeous smile. As I warmed up again, I realized it wasn't the wine I had felt the night before. "It's a good thing you're awake. If the coffee and bacon hadn't gotten you up, I would have called an ambulance." "Where did you sleep?" I asked, confused. "On the couch." A smile still filled the room. "Mom used to say that the best way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I've always held a different opinion, but since you got up to eat, I'll have to revise my opinion. The bathroom's that way. You'll be safe there while I make breakfast. I hope the bacon, eggs, and toast will do." At the table, we talked. Kathy was easy to talk to and be around. The day went well, and I felt better. When evening came, I went to my house to change and take her out to dinner. On my voicemail, I found a dozen calls from Connie. I ignored them. On Tuesday, I got a call from my lawyer. According to him, Connie had decided to play hardball. I told him of my certainty that she had met a man named Roger. This didn't surprise him in the least. "Roger Smith?" he asked. I only knew Roger. Jerry told me that they had reviewed Connie's phone records for the past 6 months and had found numerous calls to a number traced to Roger Smith. This man was Ann Barton's direct supervisor. He told me not to worry. Believing that her lawyer's tactics would bring me to my senses, Connie stopped the calls. I was glad for that, and happy to be miles away from her. It wasn't until a month later that I found out what had happened. My attorney, Mr. Jerry Lewis, railed against them. He took statements from Connie and Ann. I was to be questioned the following week. Under oath at the deposition, Connie stated that she had not committed adultery, and it was all a story to make me think she had. Ann testified that I had intimacy with her. My attorney did not challenge the testimony of either of these women. It was at this point that he pulled out his laptop and turned on a video clip. I had the good sense to use my iPhone to record a vivid description of Connie's date. Jerry asked her. After the video clip was played and a copy provided to the board, Jerry asked for one more person to be invited. He wanted Roger Smith. Connie's attorney objected, but photos were taken of Connie and Roger at 3 different restaurants. And when it was established who Roger Smith was, the situation became interesting. Lewis asked how come Connie was still close friends with the woman who slept with her husband. And why was she meeting this woman's boss at restaurants in the evenings and calling him? He also hinted that he had pictures of Smith with other women. In doing so, he said he was looking directly at Ann Burton. Trump was the fact that Jerry had already talked to Roger Smith and explained the situation to him. He was faced with the choice of being subpoenaed or helping to convince Connie to settle for less than I was offering. Both women realized that if he was subpoenaed, it could lead to a divorce. If that happened, he promised to place the blame on himself. And he was willing to lie and say it was all Ann's idea to destroy the marriage. And it was Ann who was setting up the dates between him and Connie for the entertainment afterward. After an hour of counseling, Connie agreed to my lawyer's terms. And to add salt to the wound, Jerry made Connie pay his fees. A discussion ensued as to how the other two would pay their share. I have to admit, I was impressed with my lawyer and felt rewarded. That same day, Jerry had her sign the agreement. He said he would give it to me to review. If it was approved, he would formalize it and file the order with the judge. It would take about a week at best, 2 weeks at best. But he didn't wait at all. I got the paperwork by 10 a.m. the next morning. I waited at the FedEx. I trusted him, so I just checked and sent them back. He got them by 4 p.m. By 6 p.m. I was divorced. I waited in the office and got his fax. I would receive the official decree a week later by registered mail. The divorce was finalized on Wednesday, and I wanted to have a little celebration on Thursday night. I figured who better to do it with than Kathy. We were at my house and were just about to leave when the phone rang. I was in the bathroom, so I called Katie in case it was for work. When I came out, I heard part of Kathy's conversation. "Who am I? I thought you remembered me. I'm the hall controller." Silence ensued. I couldn't make out the words, but I realized there was shouting on the other end. "Is it good to hear you?" "Yes. Now what can I do for you?" More yelling. I just stared, trying to figure out what was going on. "Well, I'll get him if you want. Wait, he's just coming out of the shower." A short pause. "Martin, you could at least wrap yourself in a towel. You're embarrassing me." "Yes, Connie, I think he can talk to you now." Kathy held her hand over the receiver. "I'm sorry that bitch comes out sometimes," she whispered with a wicked grin. I picked up the phone and smiled. I pulled it away from her face and said loud enough to be heard on the tube, "Why are you embarrassed?" Then I said, "Hello?" Connie unleashed a barrage of obscenities at me. I held the phone away from my ear. Kathy stroked one index finger with the other, whispering, "Shame on you," while trying not to laugh. Connie had told me we were still married, but she had changed her mind. She would come up to me and let me know she still loved me. She commented on Redhead with a snide remark about her being a homewrecker. When I blurted out and explained that we were divorced, she didn't believe me. I told her to check, but as far as I was concerned, it was over between us. She repeated her threat to come over. I finally said goodbye and she was still screaming. It felt pretty damn good, at least for a minute. But then it hit me even harder. Katie seemed to have figured it out. We went to dinner and then went back to her house. She said it would be better if I moved to another apartment. She offered to take care of it the next morning while I worked. I found out that she was working as an assistant property manager to keep the rent down. So the next day I ended up in the apartment next door to hers. We shared a balcony, but she said I was safe. There was a 30-inch metal railing separating the two areas. The next day in the afternoon, I got a call on my cell phone. Connie was standing in the tent in front of my old door. The manager, knowing the situation, showed her the empty apartment and swore he didn't know where she had moved to. I was later told that it wasn't a complete lie because Kathy hadn't changed her paperwork at that point. And Connie didn't budge and, saying she would wait for the hall monitor, parked her ass at Kathy's door. We had to call the manager, security, and the police to get her to leave. That night I slipped inside and headed upstairs. I knocked on Kathy's door to ask if I had been transferred. She gave me a new key and then handed me a basket of clean clothes. How embarrassing. She washed my clothes, underwear and all. See, now, I told her I didn't buy a washer and dryer because there was a laundry room in the basement. "Why buy when you can rent?" I joked. Kathy smiled. "I think it's better to own. You don't know what's been in the cars downstairs, and you won't find someone else's sock in your car," she countered. Somehow I don't think she was talking about the washing machine. But she offered to use hers anytime I needed it. I again offered to buy dinner, but she said we had gone out the night before. She cooked. Or rather, she cooked. We had salad and sandwiches. She made them very nice and delicious. Later that evening, we sat on the balcony and watched a light snow begin to fall. It turned into a storm that caused all the airplanes to ground. Connie was stuck at the airport for 36 hours. So far, Kathy and I haven't had intimacy. I had kissed her, but it was nothing more than that. I enjoyed her company and thought about her often. I was just afraid that I wasn't ready for a relationship yet. 3 weeks passed, and I invited Kathy to the company Christmas party. She was absolutely stunning. She was wearing a black sequin dress that fit her body. It came down to her ankles, but it was cut at the sides to reveal black shorts. She had heeled shoes on her feet, and her hair was swept up. Her makeup looked professional. She was wearing a diamond pennant and matching earrings. I just stared at her and whistled. "You're gorgeous. I hope I can keep you at the party." I had to explain that. I knew there would be several men at the party with much more charm and things to offer her. She smiled, took it as a compliment, and said, "You clean up well too." We arrived at the party. When she saw where I worked, she laughed. "I didn't know you worked at Tate Pressure Controls. My mom works here too. You know she keeps trying to set me up with the guy she works with. If she and I see her and she brings him over, I'll be really embarrassed." It dawned on me that we'd never discussed places of employment. "Where do you work?" "I work for Steelman." "They're one of our suppliers. It's a small world." "I work in the accounts payable department. It's not much fun, and my cubbyhole doesn't have a window." She laughed, and it warmed me up. And then I saw my boss. I directed Kathy toward him. "Hi, Bill. I want to introduce you to Kathy Taylor. Kathy, this is Bill Green, my boss, and I'm sorry I wasn't introduced to your wife." Bill smiled. "Kathy, what a surprise." "Hi, Bill. It's good to see you again." "Fran, how are the kids?" replied Kathy. I felt I had missed something. Then I experienced another shock. Jackie came over and gave Kathy a hug. I was introduced to Rick Taylor, Jackie's husband. They all seemed to know Kathy. After a minute, Kathy whispered something to Jackie. Jackie started laughing. This stunned Kathy and got everyone's attention. Jackie took her husband's hand, and they withdrew. Within minutes, Bill and his wife were engaged to another couple. I just had to ask what it was. Kathy looked me straight in the eye. She didn't say a word, just led me to a secluded spot near the dance floor. It was my mom, and I asked her not to bring up that guy from her office. I wanted her to know I was on a date and didn't need help. She just burst into laughter and led my dad away. I'll get to the bottom of this. It hit me. Jackie had offered to help her daughter show me around. The same Jackie who had someone in mind for her daughter. Kathy saw me thinking and asked, "What are you thinking about?" Say, "Do you have a sister?" "No, just me and my brother, but we lost him to cancer about 10 years ago." You could hear the pain in her voice. "I'm sorry. I hope I didn't ruin your evening." She smiled. "You didn't ruin it, and I hope my mom doesn't. I don't think she'd drag a guy in here just so I'd have a choice, like she says." I remembered how many times Jackie had tried to get me to call her daughter. Now I was with the same woman. It was kind of funny even. But I could be wrong. Or Jackie could have more than one man in mind for her Katie. I decided to keep my thoughts to myself. I would wait to see what the night would bring. A few minutes later, the orchestra started playing. I'm not a very good dancer, and I warned Katie about that. But she followed me onto the dance floor anyway. I pulled her against me and slowly moved across the floor. I don't know how good we looked, but it felt good for both of us. At dinner, we were seated with my boss and his wife. Also seated at the table were Jackie, Rick, and Mr. and Mrs. Chapman. Charles Chapman is the president of our division. I had never met him, but I had seen his picture many times. Everyone seemed to know Kathy and she knew them. I was an outsider in this group. Over the course of the evening, I noticed Jackie looking at me or Kathy, smiling or laughing, sipping champagne. But I noticed other things too. I saw the love between Jackie and Rick. I watched them closely from across the table. Jackie listened to every word her husband said. He was just as committed to her words. They made frequent contact. I noticed that when Rick spoke, she would wrap her arms around his right hand. She would interlock her fingers and lay her head on his shoulder. He would place her left hand on top of his. As he did so, he unclasped his hand and exposed his ring finger and index finger, exposing his wedding ring. His gold ring touched her stone. Perhaps he did this because the stone was so large, but I think it was done more to show their union. It seemed like they were always touching each other. I envied them. I watched and saw what life could be like. I should have realized that it could have just been a pretense or a temporary phenomenon, but I would bet it wasn't. I had been watching for so long that my companion noticed how distracted I was. Kathy got up to go to the ladies' room. Jackie and Fran went with her. When Kathy returned, I got up to help her into her seat. Instead, she smiled at me. It warmed me to the core. She took my hand and led me to the dance floor. She melted into my arms. After a minute, she looked up and asked, "Can I tell you something and you won't be mad?" "Sure. Why would I be angry? Unless you tell me you saw your ex-boyfriend and want to go home with him." I half joked, but I had a fear that she was too good to be true. Katie pulled away from me and looked me straight in the eye. With a stern face, she said in a serious tone, "I'm here with the man I chose to be with." Then she relaxed and rested her head on my shoulder again. What I was going to say, before I was interrupted. But she didn't get angry. My mom confessed, "You're the person she wanted to introduce to me." I couldn't believe my ears. And the thought of what we'd both said. Me about my boss's secretary wanting to pawn her daughter off on me. And Katie about her mom always finding a boyfriend for her. But we were both amused by it. "I'm glad I met you, Kathy. I only wish I had invited your mom that first day." I was sincere in my words. We danced some more and I lost my head to her charms. After a few minutes, she whispered, "What were you so engrossed in at the table?" I answered honestly without hesitation. Later, I would realize how comfortable I was with her. "I was a little jealous watching Jackie and your father." I felt her tense up slightly. "I didn't know you were partial to older women." "This isn't about your mom. I see what I'm missing when a woman loves me the way your mom loves your dad, or to love the way he loves your mom. I want a woman like that." She looked at me with beautiful green eyes. "Even when the bitch in her comes out every now and then?" I smiled at her and kissed her forehead lightly. "As long as it's properly directed." "I know, but sometimes—" "What if?" she asked softly. "Even then, what more could I ask for? I want you. I want to know you. All of you. And I want to get to know you. I want to be everything to you." "Everything?" "Yes, your woman." I was stunned and honored. I had strong feelings for Kathy, I realized that. That's why I'd never tried to get her into bed. But in that moment, I felt a burning desire. I looked down at her. "I liked the list, but you left something out." She looked puzzled for a moment. "You missed your wife." Our dance stopped and we kissed. We were still kissing when the music stopped and the dancers started clapping. This interrupted our kiss, and we looked around to see many people smiling at us. I took her hand, and we found a secluded spot behind a potted plant. "I want to take you home." She looked up and said, "You can't do that today." I thought, great, it's her time of the month. By then, the music had stopped. The band was leaving for a break. We went back to the table. Her mom looked up and smiled slightly. "Oh, there you are. We thought we were going to have to send out a search party." Everyone at the table laughed, as if they knew why we were gone. Something had changed. As we listened to the table talk, I could feel Katie's touch. She did many of the things her mother did. I wondered if it was instinct or training. At the end of the evening, Jackie made a final toast. "To mothers, they sometimes know what they're talking about." As she uttered these words, she looked directly at Kathy. Everyone at the table agreed, taking their last sips. Kathy hugged everyone at the table, and I shook hands with all the men. We went to get my car. I used the valet service. When he pulled up and held the door for me, I ignored him. I walked Katie around the truck and opened her door. I helped her into the seat and even buckled her seatbelt. I wanted to leave as soon as possible for several reasons. One was that there was a line of people behind us waiting for their cars, and the other was my desire to be alone with her. I tipped the valet and we drove off. We hadn't even gotten out of the car yet when I felt her hand on my leg. I've really enjoyed this evening. I just don't want it to end. I drove her back to the apartment building. She didn't utter a word as I stopped at my door and ushered her inside. A moment later, we were in a dark bedroom. I won't go into the details of our night because it's too personal. We fell asleep late in the morning. When I woke up, I found her still beside me. She didn't ask where we were going. I saw the joy in her eyes when we pulled up to the jewelry store. I let him pick out a set of rings, and there was no problem with the price. She was a little taken aback when I wouldn't let her wear it, but she took the box and put it in her pocket. Now call your parents and ask if we can stop by their house. As we drove to her parents' house, I let her look at it. A few minutes later, we were at their door. Jackie and Rick greeted us. We were in the room when I started. Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I come with a confession and a question. All three in the room exchanged glances. Last night, I'm afraid I took advantage of the situation. I should have refrained, but I didn't. I should have behaved properly and respectfully and taken Katie home. Her home. But I didn't. I'm afraid I dishonored her. She is very dear to me, and I would not want my actions to dishonor her or our child. That is why I have come to ask your permission to ask Katie to marry me. This stunned them all. I explained, I will only ask for her hand in marriage with your blessing. Jackie spoke up. I think it will be Kathy's choice, but we are both grateful to you for taking care of our blessing. And now I can leave my daughter for a moment. She stood up and called Katie into the other room. Within a minute, they were already taking Rick away. I sat in the room wondering what I was doing. The wait wasn't long. Rick came back to me. Martin, Jackie and I bless you, but we would like to ask. I expected I was about to fall over. We would ask that you leave her with us and come back tomorrow to ask her. If you do, please wear a costume. It goes without saying, there will be a celebration. With these words, I was escorted to the door. I thought about the costume as I drove. The only thing that occurred to me was that we could attend church together. And why the wait? Were they really going to talk her out of it? We'd only be engaged. Not that we'd be married right away. But just in case, I wanted it to happen soon. The day passed slowly and heavily for me. I was afraid it was all too good to be true. And at night, I didn't sleep well. I felt more alone than ever. Sunday came. I called. I wanted to make sure I'd be there on time. I expected to be there before 9 so I could make it to the church service, but it turned out that wasn't the case. I was invited at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Needless to say, I was on time. Jackie met me at the door. She had a pleasant smile, almost disarming. I felt a chill, imagining the worst. I was escorted into a room where Katie and her father were waiting. When we were all seated, Jackie asked, So, why did you come to see Martin? I looked at Kathy and realized how much I wanted her in my life. Her absence the previous night was still too vivid for me. I've come to ask your daughter to marry me, Mrs. Taylor. Jackie smiled. You have been blessed, just as you were yesterday. Would you like some privacy? As if on cue, the two left us. I walked over to the couch where Kathy was sitting. Her hands were resting on her lap. Her right hand covered her left. I sat down next to her. She turned around, shifting her legs, and let her knee touch mine. I looked into those beautiful green eyes and asked, Kathy Taylor, will you take me to be your husband? A ring box appeared in my hand and I opened it. There was a surprise waiting for me. All that was left was the engagement ring. When I looked back, I saw that Kathy was holding her left hand with the ring in place. She kissed me and whispered, "Yes, yes, yes. And please don't be mad when you let me look at it. I just had to wear it. And I'm glad I did because I was so lonely last night. I was afraid my mom would scare you away." When she finished the sentence, there were tears in her eyes. We hugged for a few minutes before Jackie stepped through the door. "Can we join you?" And when they returned and sat in the chairs across from us, Jackie smiled at her husband. He smiled back and held out his hand to her. With a twinkle in her eye, she started. I can see that the answer was yes. But I knew it would be. The only one who doubted it was Kathy. She thought I was too demanding. Having said that, she smiled at Rick. She wasn't the only one who thought I was too demanding sometimes, but he always let me get my way. Yes, and I want to thank you both for understanding. I will do everything I can to make your daughter happy. I'm sure you will. I knew you were right for each other when I first saw you, Martin. I tried to bring you two together, but without success. But since you found each other on your own, it only further proves me right. Now, about the situation. Are you saying you dishonored my daughter? Jackie raised an eyebrow. Yes, dishonored, and I apologize to you and her. Mom, it's our business, Katie said, blushing. Rick only smiled and shook his head. Jackie didn't relent. Are you afraid there's cause for concern? Mom, please. Kathy, you agreed that I could voice my opinion. Now, do you have cause for concern? My ears popped and my hands became clammy. What was this leading up to? Yes, ma'am. I didn't use birth control, and I found out later that Kathy didn't use it. You are quite right. Kathy never took the pill or anything else, and I'm proud of her for that. But you must not have used birth control like they say you did? Her father sat back in his chair, rolling his eyes and shaking his head. But he was still holding Jackie's hand. No, ma'am. I didn't use it. You said you love my daughter and don't want her to be dishonored? Quite right, Mrs. Taylor. When I said that, Katie kissed my cheek and rested her head on my shoulder. As she did so, she extended her left arm and pointed her fingers toward the ceiling. She was looking at the ring on her finger. An expression appeared on Jackie's face. Martin, she's been looking at that ring since you left. She picked up the ring and looked at her husband. But I think I know why. Because it symbolizes your love and her devotion to you. Where was I? Yes, on the fact that I want to offer a solution to your problem or possible problem. If you want to honor my daughter for the gift she has given you, you can show it by marrying her immediately. Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Taylor. We'll do it as quickly as we can agree. Is that so? What if I can arrange it today, in this house? I couldn't believe my ears. Tonight? I turned and looked at Katie. She was frowning slightly. She pulled me to her and whispered, "We don't have to." I looked at my all-too-soon-to-be mother-in-law. You can do it? Yes, I can. But it will be your decision. I'm not demanding, just suggesting. I smiled. So we can sleep together tonight without any shame? Martin, you can sleep together either way and we won't be ashamed. Kathy, don't you want to take a chance tonight? After all, you might change your mind. I just wanted to give you some time. Martin, I am your woman with or without this ring. My heart belongs to you. I turned around. If it's not too much trouble for you, I would consider it an honor to be married this day. Jackie looked at her husband. She had a smile on her face that said she was very pleased. She made the call, and we waited. While we waited, my future mother-in-law explained. Today's wedding was my idea. I discussed it with Rick, then with Kathy. You see, I'm selfish. I want Katie by my side. She is my only daughter and my only child left. She left us and lived in California for 5 years. She just came back to us. She arrived about a month before you did, Martin. Like I said, I'm selfish. I want Katie to put down roots here with me. I want to see her happy and I want her to give me grandchildren. Martin will do his best for you. Kathy is 33 years old and... Mom, you're so... You don't have to tell everything. I am your mother, Jackie said as fact, and that gives me some privileges. Like I said, she's 33 years old, but with the right man, meaning you, Martin, she'll have time to give me some grandchildren. I should have about 10 now, but that hasn't happened. But then you didn't show up in her life until now. She waited, and I believe she acted wisely. A few minutes later, the preacher arrived, and in another less than an hour, Kathy became Mrs. Martin Raymond Jameson. Just as we were about to leave, my father-in-law stopped us. Jackie stood beside him, holding both hands on his arm. He handed me a package. It was a week's room at the Imperial Hotel downtown, and it was for a honeymoon suite. It's the least I can do since Jackie imposed on you two, he smiled. But he wasn't the least bit angry. We spent a week of total bliss in the suite. Jackie ordered all our meals and the staff would call and ask when we wanted them served. The first course was lobster and oysters. It had a card attached to it. I opened it. It was a greeting card with a note. "Just to keep you strong," it said. She signed it, and underneath she drew two beautiful eyes. Both had long lashes, but one was close set. She winked at us. The first week I returned, my boss called me into his office. I wondered what I had done. Jackie was there waiting for me. "Martin, I want to turn to you and ask you for a favor." "I'll do my best." "I want to ask you first and then Kathy. I know what Rick will say, but it will be up to you." I waited. My mother-in-law turned out to be full of surprises. "I want to ask your permission to have a big wedding for you and Kathy." I frowned. "Please be lenient with me. She's my only daughter. Rick and I didn't have a wedding. We eloped and got married. We had no wealth and my father didn't like my choice of husband. We were starting from scratch. Everything we have, Rick earned. He made a good living. So please let me splurge on the wedding, and if you agree, I'll have Rick add another week or 2 weeks at Imperial or Hawaii if you want." I realized what that meant to her. I smiled. "I'll let you and Katie work it out." She stepped toward me and kissed my cheek. "I'll get my way. I'm her mother. I'll use guilt. Thank you, Rick. You're awesome, and I can be proud of the man my daughter married." She turned to leave, but turned around to look at me. "Did I tell you I was going to be a meddling mother-in-law?" It had been decided, and it was going to happen on our 6-month wedding anniversary. While we waited, life settled down, and we began to experience all the joys of married life. We moved into Katie's apartment and vacated our own. We kept what we wanted to keep since we were going to buy a house. This was part of putting down roots. The day came and we were going to get married. I would say, remarry. As we stood at the altar, the preacher gave a little speech. "Friends and family, we are gathered here today for a special occasion. But some of you may not know that this is merely a reaffirmation of their vows. 6 months ago, I had the honor of pronouncing Maren and Katie husband and wife. They wanted to be together and not dishonor their family. So now you know, let's get started." The wedding went great and we got another week at Imperial. I discovered that it cost my father-in-law a tidy sum, but not as much as Jackie spent on her wedding. But they were happy, and we were happy to oblige. After the celebration, we moved into our house. One evening, I walked into the house just as Kathy was answering the phone. "Jameson Residence." "Hi, how are you?" "Glad you didn't have a problem with the number. It's on the list." "Sorry to hear that." I only understood one side of the conversation. "Yeah, I'm glad you got it." "Oh, it wasn't much trouble or expense." "Yeah, just wanted you to know. And I'm sorry I somehow forgot to send your invitation, but I included it in the package." "Yes, the picture. Yes, really. So much you said?" "The postcard. Yes, I thought you should know. Actually, you're the first to know about it. Martin just walked in. Do you think I should tell him?" "Really? Well, we have a lot to discuss, so I have to let you go, Connie. Call again. It's always a pleasure." "You shouldn't say that. I was the controller in the audience. Yes, I understand your feelings, but I really have to go. Martin is here and looking at me with loving eyes. Bye. Who was that? I asked, dumbfounded. Just Connie. What's her name? Kathy smiled as she dialed a phone number. What's Houston's area codes? Within a minute, all calls from Houston were blocked. What was that? Kathy smiled at me. Just the bitch in me coming out again. Have you lost your mind? No, it seems well directed, but what was that? Just then the dryer buzzer went off. I have things to do, but come on, I'll tell you. As she approached the laundry room, she picked up an envelope. It was smaller than a letter, probably some kind of greeting card. In the laundry room, she took the clothes out of the dryer and spread them out on the counter. I wanted to get her attention, so I took her in my arms and sat her on the dryer facing me. Now tell me what happened. I just felt terrible that we hadn't informed Connie about our wedding. So today I sent her a little package via FedEx. I didn't expect her to get it today, but it doesn't matter anymore. Go on, my love. The parcel contained a newspaper clipping about our wedding. Well, the ceremony. Mom really picked up on the words, didn't she? No roundabout way, I teased. I sent the remaining invitation with her name on the envelope, explaining that it just got lost in the mishmash. And I sent the picture of you and me at the altar. I hope there aren't any voodoo queens left in Houston. She'll pay them to turn me into a toad. I don't believe that. I also put one napkin of each color with our names on it. And last of all, I put a card. Like I said, I was planning on her getting it tomorrow. What's the card? Katie held out the card she'd brought with her to me. I opened it. It was an announcement of an upcoming birth. I read, I'm going to be a daddy. As I read, I learned that Jackie had bought the cards on the Saturday before our wedding. Sorry, I should have told you first. She just got ahead of you. I mean, she called before you got home. I didn't care. I wanted my wife. I made love to her there on the dryer. When we finished and took a breath, a thought occurred to me. You know, Connie will see the date of the ceremony and the arrival date and think we were supposed to be married? What do we care? We know different. But it won't make any difference. Besides, the truth doesn't matter to her. She's unhappy. And I have to help her through it. I just have to rub in her face what she's lost. Later that night, a thought occurred to me. Should I send a thank you card to Ann Baxter? The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.